So the proponents of critical race theory generally cycle through three different, very, very, very predictable arguments when it comes to fighting back against those who are calling them out on their absurd ideology. Now, the first argument that they always come to is, you're racist. If you don't agree with critical race theory, that is just proof of your inherent racism. Well, that's actually the basis for, white fragility, basis for how to be an anti-racist, basis for every pop culture thing related to critical race theory. All of those best-selling books like Anti-Racist Baby and all of this crap. You're racist if you don't agree with us. Now, this is a pretty easy argument to disprove for rational thinkers because people promoting critical race theory tend to be overtly racist people. They tend to be the very first people who are using racial slurs. They actually even say that to be white is to be considered normal in our society, and anything that is non-white is considered abnormal. Dude, that's racist. The only people who agree with that are actual critical race theorists. Critical race theorists also say, black people are incapable of telling time or getting an ID or keeping a schedule or working hard. That's racist. That's an incredibly racist ideology. So every time a critical race theorist comes and says, you're racist, you're just showing your white fragility is showing, it's because they're projecting their own racism onto you. Now, people have started to figure this out. They're like, everything can't be racist. Not everything is racist. America is not a fundamentally racist country. And so the critical race theorists, they had to move on to the next argument, which is, you're just violating our free speech, which of course is absurd in and of itself, because this is the side that has tried to cancel half the flipping country. This is the side that last summer they were looting and rioting everywhere and demanding that people agree with them or put a Black Lives Matter sign in their window, otherwise they would destroy their business. And of course, critical race theorists, they're the very first ones to try to compel the speech of the people who are in their captive audiences. This is why critical race theory training, whether it be done in organizations or in schools, is so incredibly dangerous, because it is violating the First Amendment rights of every single person in that training. When you are forced to admit that you are racist, when you are forced to say, I am an oppressor to your classmates, as did happen to a 17-year-old high school student in Nevada, was forced to say he was an oppressor in order to graduate from high school, and he wasn't even white, but his skin color was light enough that it didn't really matter. That's compelled speech. That is against the First Amendment. So we've kind of knocked those two arguments out of the way. Of course, you are not racist if you disagree with critical race theory. Of course, you are not opposed to free speech if you disagree with critical race theory. So now we're on argument number 3, which is, you don't even know the definition of critical race theory anyway. Like, how dare you even talk about it? You don't even know what the definition is. And in the last couple of weeks, we've seen articles popping up all over the place, basically saying, I don't even know why we're talking about this. You don't even have the definition correct. And one of these articles just appeared in Forbes the other day, and it mentions my friend, State Representative Keith Ammon, who introduced the bill in New Hampshire to ban critical race theory in state government and in state agency contractors. So we're going to take a look at this article, and I'm going to point out every single lie that Janice here, the senior contributor to Forbes, tells in this article, and we're going to have a good old time with it. But before we get into that, folks, if you enjoy my channel, I do try to post content almost every single day during the week. I do tend to take the weekends off, but I do really try to post content every single day, whether it be a live stream or just short clips like this or what have you, around different topics in news, culture, basically whatever I find interesting. If you want to help me out, you can support me by subscribing to the channel. Making sure, if you think you're subscribed, just double check, because YouTube literally unsubscribes people every single day from my channel. But subscribe, double check to make sure you're subscribed. Turn on those notifications. Only 15% of you have notifications turned on. All this stuff really helps me out. Leave a comment if you want to feed this algorithm. I really, really, really appreciate it. All right, let's take a look at this article in Forbes. The war on critical race theory continues as some call it anti-white. As of late, discussions around critical race theory have dominated the public conversation. Critical race theory, CRT, can be conceptualized as a framework that offers researchers, practitioners, and policymakers a race-conscious approach to understanding education, inequality, and structural racism to find solutions that lead to greater justice. Let's see where they conceptualize that from, because that's not exactly how I would, okay, so it's in a scholarly article, whatevs. Under CRT, race is used as the primary mechanism to understand, unpack, and analyze the ways that structures, systems continue to perpetuate racial inequalities and uphold a racial hierarchy system. Well, this is, you know what, I'm actually pretty satisfied with this sentence, because at least they're admitting that race is used as a primary mechanism to understand everything. This is something you need to understand about critical race theory, is that it puts race and racism into absolutely everything. The basis of this whole ideology is that racism exists everywhere. It exists in every person, in every institution, in every conversation, in every interaction, and the job of the critical theorist is to uncover how the racism occurred, not if it occurred, because racism is always assumed to have occurred. This is why every single thing under the sun is racist nowadays. Racism is assumed to have occurred, and it is the job of the critical theorist to really dissect, to get in there, to unpack and analyze how the racism occurred in absolutely everything, all the time, forever. Scholar Kimberly Crenshaw is cited as one of the originators of CRT movement, along with Neil and Stephanie in 1989. CRT actually started before that, but okay. CRT explores how racism is able to endure because it is embedded into the fabric of our society. And see, again, they said the quiet part out loud. They're saying that racism is embedded into every single part of our society, which of course is patently untrue. And if you ask them for specific examples of how racism is embedded, they'll say, well, don't you understand? Don't you know statistics? They never, ever, ever give you specifics when you ask that question. Critical race scholar Dr. Angel Jones shared an email what initially drew her to study CRT. I was originally introduced to critical race theory during my doctoral program. Surprise there. I was immediately drawn to it because as a black woman at a predominantly white institution, it was the first time I read a theory that acknowledged the roles of race and racism played in my experiences, both inside and outside the academy. All right, Angel, let's just break this down for a second. You're telling me that you were at a racist institution in which you were accepted into a doctoral program even though you're not white? See, one of the things that critical race theory teaches is that white people will only ever do things that benefit other white people. They will never do anything that benefits non-white people. It's only ever about benefiting white people. And so for a student in a doctoral program, which is already a pretty privileged place to be in from the get-go, says, well, you know, I just don't understand because I'm a black woman at a predominantly white institution. Then how did you get into a doctoral program if the doctoral program was fundamentally racist? That makes absolutely no sense. CRT is an effective lens to better understand disparities in housing, education, and healthcare, but not everyone is on board with CRT, and some are demanding we refrain from teaching it to children in schools. Well, there is actually no evidence that CRT is an effective lens to better understand disparities in housing. And okay, back up for a second. So I used to write for Forbes. At some point, they apparently fired me, but they never actually told me, but I wasn't really writing for them anymore anyway, so it didn't really matter. But I just want to say this before we continue with this article. Being a contributor to Forbes is basically like having a blog on Forbes' website. That's all it is. You can go in and write whatever crap you want. You can make stuff up. They don't really check it. They don't edit it. Sometimes they'll go in and they'll edit for style, like after you post it or things like that. But this is basically a blog. People should not take Forbes contributors that seriously. Dude, you shouldn't take any of the things that I wrote for, I actually put the work in when I was writing for Forbes, but it was I didn't have to. I could have written, there were times when I wrote for Forbes that I was just I would write whatever was on my mind. I would go and find some random thing that kind of backed it up to link in the article. This is not journalism, is what I'm trying to say. This is not journalism. Forbes does this just to have a metric F ton of content because this is how they make money. But you should always question what you're reading when there are Forbes contributors, because it's not journalism. It is a glorified blog, and that is all it is. All right, I'm stepping off my soapbox now. Let's continue with our article. Despite insurmountable evidence, of how racism permeates every single system and structure within the United States. Well, if the evidence is so insurmountable, Janice, then why aren't you giving me an example? Why aren't you linking to any example to prove that it is an overwhelming amount of evidence that racism permeates every single system and structure within the United States and beyond? Despite that insurmountable evidence. Forbes journalist. There is growing criticism and condemnation of CRT and its validity. Within many countries, there have a documented history of slavery and genocide. There is still a failure to acknowledge the gruesome and grotesque legacy of racism that is upheld structurally and systematically every day. Notice she still has not given any concrete examples or data or evidence or anything else. It seems easier to write the past off as a distant memory that no longer impacts our current reality. That's not evidence. In January, Republican. You can almost see, it's almost like the clouds have come in. There's lightning in the background. Pfft. Republican House of Representatives member Keith Ammon proposed a bill that was strangely reminiscent of Trump's diversity training ban that was pushed forth in 2020. All right, let's break down this sentence and all the lies that Janice, Forbes journalist, told in this sentence right here. First of all, it is true that Keith Ammon is a Republican. That is true. Fact check true. Proposed a bill that was strangely reminiscent. Well, it wasn't actually strangely reminiscent, Janice, because Keith has actually spoken publicly about how it was based on Donald Trump's executive order. It was also based on the fact that a university professor came forward, contacted Keith, actually still remained anonymous to this day because this university professor was so freaked out at what was going on at a state university that he took the step to contact a state representative to say, this ain't right. Was strangely reminiscent of Trump's diversity training ban. Trump didn't ban diversity training. The bills don't ban diversity training. The bill in New Hampshire that Keith Ammon introduced literally says you can do diversity training, and it is in the general provisions section. It's on page 4 of the bill. Janice, I'm sure you didn't read the bill in the course of doing your journalism with Forbes, but it is on page 4 of the bill. It's in a section called general provisions. It literally says in the bill, this bill does not prevent organizations from doing diversity training. It literally says it in the bill. The bill proposed by Ammon prohibits schools and organizations from contracting individuals who will explore divisive concepts such as race and sex scapegoating. Well, there's a whole specific list of divisive concepts. And again, the bill doesn't prohibit doing diversity training. The bill, by the way, also in the general provision section, what you're going to find is the bill actually doesn't even prohibit discussion of the divisive concepts. It just prohibits teaching it as fact. The Atlantic, you needed, Janice. That's her name, right? Janice. You had to go read the Atlantic to report on what's in a 4-page bill? 4 pages. 4. Jesus. Lawmakers in states like Arkansas, Idaho, and possibly Louisiana have introduced similar bills. Well, also, it's been banned in Idaho. Idaho didn't just introduce the bill. It's been banned in Idaho. It's been banned in Oklahoma. It's been banned in Tennessee. Arizona just introduced one. Rhode Island introduced one. West Virginia introduced one. So, again, Janice isn't very good at journalism, apparently. What's interesting to note is that the CRT backlash is not just coming from white conservatives in southern and rural parts of the U.S. Some of the CRT pushback stems from those who are most impacted by radicalized systems. Recently, South Carolina Senator Tim Scott, who also happens to be the only black Republican in the Senate, remarked that America is not a racist country. And just days ago, Vernon Jones, a Republican gubernatorial candidate in the state of Georgia, debated academic and political commentator Dr. Mark Lamont Hill on whether CRT should be taught in schools. Jones tweeted, "It's time for our schools to stop teaching our kids to hate America. CRT criticism is not just in the U.S. activist and educator Costanza." I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that name. Discussed the global CRT backlash in a recent Instagram Live conversation. She mentioned British politician who had been an outspoken opponent of CRT and noted that she felt that CRT authors actually want a segregated society. Well, this is actually provable. Because when critical race theory training is done in organizations, you know what they do? They take the white employees, they put them in one room. They take the non-white employees, they put them in another room. The white employees get one kind of training, the non-white employees get another kind of the training. That's segregation. That's literal segregation. That is what your training is doing. It is literally segregation. She also shared that adopting a mindset that Black people are victims simply because of their skin color is poisonous for young people. This is also very, very true. When you teach people that success is not possible no matter what they do, when you teach people that their actions do not matter, and that success is just out of reach because of societal systemic racism, you are inhibiting their future success. And it's even more dangerous when you teach this to children while their brains are still forming. And this is now being taught to children as young as 4 years old. Anything that you teach to children before they are 8 years old is extremely, extremely hard for them to unlearn later. So yes, it is poisonous for young people. There has been similar pushback in France where anti-racism educators and activists are being accused of threatening the values of the Republic. In Australia, there have been attacks on CRT, while many touting CRT as being anti-white. The increased wave of backlash against CRT is a direct result of the heightened support for the Black Lives Matter. No. The increased wave of backlash against CRT is a direct result of the heightened support for Black Lives Matter following the murder of George Floyd, explained in an Instagram live. Forbes journalist, senior contributor, is quoting a random person's Instagram live video to say that, this is just nothing more like these white people, they're just uncomfortable with the Black Lives Matter movement. That's all it is. That's all that's going on. It's a sign of their white fragility, isn't it? Although conversations about CRT are likely to be ongoing and contentious, it is vital for everyone to understand how race and white supremacy have impacted the ways and the systems and structures operate. Learning about CRT is important because in order to challenge systems of oppression, we must first be able to identify them. CRT encourages students to become more civically engaged by equipping them with the tools they need to think critically about issues of race and racism. Despite the opposition, awareness about CRT is imperative. The best way to combat backlash and criticism about CRTs is through education. This is their answer to everything. If we can only give them a book to read, or we can just educate them on what this is, because they just obviously don't understand the definition. They don't even know what they're talking about. They don't understand the definition anyway. It's going to fix everything if we just educate them and make them do the work. As witnessed during a recent interview between Vernon Jones and Dr. Mark Lamont Hill, many challengers of CRT don't have a full and thorough understanding of what it actually is. Ding, 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 ding. Told you. What did I say at the beginning of the video? Number 1, you're racist. Number 2, free speech. Number 3, they don't even understand what it is anyway. I don't even know why we're talking about this because they don't understand the definition. They need to be educated about the definition. There it is, folks. Right there. In Forbes, so you know it must be true. Many of its opponents are unfamiliar with it, and their opposition is resulting from a fear of the unknown. Yes, that must be what it is. I have only spent the better part of the last year watching these trainings almost every single day. I am losing my mind. You're watching the trainings, or reading the trainings, or reading the books, or doing anything else. I have no idea what you're even talking about. I only read more of your stuff than you do. Additionally, increased education would also help dispel the myths and misconceptions about it, contrary to the false narratives being told CRT is not the enemy, racism is. And we defeat that enemy by using critical frameworks like CRT to help us challenge systemic oppression. Janice, Forbes journalist. I am the author of best-selling books, Dirty Diversity and The Pink Elephant. I founded an award-winning consultancy in which I help to create businesses to foster equity and inclusion. I host Dirty Diversity dinner sessions. Holy shit. This woman is one of those people. Okay, this is true story. Like, rich white people will hire people like Janice to come to a dinner party and teach them how they're all racist. I swear to God, this is a thing. This is apparently what she does. I host dirty diversity dinner sessions, which are informal conversations about diversity-related topics discussed over delicious food. And she has a podcast, and she has a PhD in organizational psychology, like me. But she's obviously using it to be an activist, whereas I actually care about, like, helping people and doing stuff, but, you know, whatevs. All right, guys, this is all I have for this article. Obviously, I know more about critical race theory than Janice does. Janice, if you don't like this video, I'll debate you anytime, my dear. I will debate you any single time on this topic. You're also welcome to come to my Friday happy hours at 3 p.m. Eastern time, where we actually get together and we watch one of your critical race theory diversity trainings and talk about it. I've probably seen more of this training than you have, or most people have, because I'm a glutton for punishment. All right, guys, that's all I have for this video. If you enjoyed it, again, click subscribe, double check, make sure you're subscribed. If you enjoyed it, share it out with your friends who might be pulled in to being convinced that they just don't know what CRT actually is. They don't know what it is. That's all I've got for right now. I'll see you soon.